Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're going to be talking about why a property might become haunted. More specifically, why a property that was seemingly quiet might suddenly become haunted. Now, I've experienced spirits my entire life, so for me, it's pretty commonplace to have these kind of interactions. It was only when I started attending shows and events that I realised not everyone is in the same position, not everyone has the same experiences. I would often be asked questions such as why their house is haunted, how can they tell if their house is haunted, how can they stop a haunting, will a house cleansing stop a haunting, can I cleanse their house for them to stop a haunting? It was only then that I realised that while I would feel quite comfortable with such an experience, not everyone is going to feel the same way. For some people, finding out that their property is haunted can be unnerving at best and terrifying at worst. So I figured let's sit down and have a conversation about this to talk about why a property might be haunted to start off with, and also why a property might suddenly become haunted, using both my own experiences and the experiences of my friends within the community to try to explain why some of these things might happen and also how you can troubleshoot and solve the problem if it is relatively minor. Now, of course, I am not the most knowledgeable person on this topic. I can only draw on my experiences and the knowledge of the people around me. So if you are interested to learn more, I would certainly recommend reaching out to other members of the community and see if they have any further understanding on the topic. But I'm hoping that this video and some of the others I'm going to make on the topic in the future might help calm a little bit of ease, might help explain some things that maybe aren't common knowledge within the community unless you are really interested in spirits and work with them. Now, throughout this video, when I refer to a spirit or a haunting, I am specifically referring to human spirits. Now, spirits come in all shapes and forms, and not all of them are human. You can have demons, you can have angels, you can have fairies, you can also have human spirits. And for the purpose of this video, I'm primarily going to be focusing on human spirits, but a haunting isn't solely going to be human spirits. It could be any kind of spirit. But I have found, especially when it comes to these styles of haunting, more often than not, it is due to human attachment rather than anything more nefarious than that. Though if you would like further videos on the signs of other hauntings, such as those done by fairies or also done by demons and the like, feel free to let me know and I will try to compile a suitable episode on those topics as well. Now, when it comes to hauntings, you'll often find a property is either haunted before you arrive, in which case you'll often find there is a history of haunting within the property, or you might find that a property suddenly becomes haunted. And I find that generally speaking, most hauntings can be divided into two categories: hauntings of the land or the building, and hauntings of objects and people. So we're going to start with the first category, and then we're going to move on to the second. And hopefully by the end of all of this, I will have been able to explain this in a reasonably easy to understand way. But this topic is very convoluted and it can get very difficult to remember every single aspect. So it could be worth coming back to this in little chunks so that you can take the sections in so they don't get confusing. Before we go any further, let's talk about why spirits might exist. What might cause someone to stick around as a spirit instead of moving on to whatever afterlife there is? There's a lot of discourse among the community, but for the most part, it's relatively accepted that a lot of spirits stick around because they died suddenly, tragically, or of a quick illness. They may also stick around when they love an environment so much that they don't want to leave, or if they have what's commonly referred to as unfinished business. These are really the main reasons why a spirit may stick around, and it goes to explain why some of these hauntings might happen. Now, starting with property and land, this is really common to be haunted. Now, especially when it comes to old properties, well-worked land, and locations where severe accidents or incidents have occurred. Now, there's a running question that's become its own joke that says, why are there only old ghosts? Why are there no ghosts from the 2000s or the 2010s? And the answer is that there are ghosts from the 2000s and the 2010s. It's just that life is very different than it used to be. If we think about why ghosts might stick around, it's often because of accident, injury, sudden death, tragic loss. These kind of things do still happen in the modern day, but not nearly to the same degree as they did several hundred years ago, which goes to explain why a lot of old buildings do experience hauntings. For the most part, old buildings weren't built with regulations. The stairs were exceptionally steep. The wallpaper was often made of asbestos. There were so many dangers within the home that often death in the home was exceptionally common. Someone just needs to miss a step as they go down the stairs and it's all over, because the stairs were often so steep they could be deadly. Someone just has to fall asleep in their gas-heated bathtub and they could be boiled alive. And if you think I'm joking, I'm actually not. That was actually an invention. Oftentimes childbirth was done at home, and there was a high infant and mother mortality rate depending on the age where this took place. If you lived on farmland, there was a very high chance that you could have a farming accident that was tragic. And all of these years and all of this time with illnesses that could not be treated, with childbirth and infant loss, as well as accidents such as falling down the stairs or farming accidents, you end up with this history being built up of loss within that space. And so we can see very quickly how a house, a property or land might become haunted simply by the sheer weight of history that is kept within that place. Now, hauntings of land and property doesn't have to be ancient, but as we've discussed, it was likely more likely that you would die at home historically than we see today. But there can be modern hauntings that occur on land or in properties. This can be due to a death within a space that is tragic or sudden, or in a lot of cases, the person simply doesn't want to leave. If someone's lived in a property for 60 years, they might love that place so much that they simply don't want to move on, and so you'll find that they stick around. They might also stick around in that space if there's other members of their family or people that they care about that are still there and they want to watch over them. So not all hauntings of land and property are sad. In some cases, they simply just love the place so much that they don't want to leave. These hauntings are often based on a tragic event, something that has happened in the life of a person that has taken their life, or something that has happened in the life of the person that has made them fall so madly in love with a location that they can never bring themselves to leave. And so because of this, we can often pinpoint the start of a haunting down to the death of that person, whether it's caused by their sudden untimely end or simply because they died loving a place so much they never wanted to leave it. But in some cases, a haunting might be sudden and not have any understandable reason behind it. You might be living in a house for 20 years and have never experienced a haunting before in your entire time there, and then all of a sudden, a haunting starts up. Now, when it comes to land or property, it might be because something has been disturbed. This is particularly the case if you have done renovation work on a building. A lot of times people will come to events and shows, they will go to psychic mediums when they've suddenly experienced a haunting for the first time and they can't understand a reason why. For many people, even if they don't actively believe in ghosts, they understand the premise that someone passes away and their ghost stays in a location, and then the haunting comes from that spirit. But when a sudden haunting occurs and there's not been any deaths in that area, and you can't think of any reason why it might have happened, if you've started renovation work, it might be the cause. Spirits in a location may become at peace. Essentially, they don't really mind what goes on, they just want to be there. Some spirits also don't even acknowledge that they're dead, and so they won't notice that you're present, and they'll just keep doing their own daily routine day after day after day because they don't even realize that they're dead. This is particularly the case if they've died suddenly. Oftentimes you'll see this with women walking up and down the stairs. They won't even realize that they fell, and they'll just continue doing their day-to-day life. But in the event that there is a sudden energetic surge in that location, you may find that a previously peaceful house might become incredibly haunted. The most common reason for this is that you've done demolition work. You've disturbed their home. If you live with spirits, the house isn't just yours, it's theirs too. And if you suddenly bulldoze down a wall, they're going to get really angry about that. And you might find that once you've done renovation work, serious renovation work, I mean like ripping out the old floors, tearing down the walls, they might start getting really pissed and they might start showing themselves more and more. It's not only renovation work that might do this. Any high energy event has the potential to cause this response. This includes a fire in the property. It can also include something as simple as an exceptionally heated argument. Screaming and shouting and all of that pent-up aggressive energy has the ability to rile up spirits. And especially if they were just minding their own business and all of a sudden you're screaming and shouting in their living room, I can understand why they might want to check out what's happening. So if you're suddenly experiencing a haunting in your location and this sounds like the kind of thing that might have happened, it could be worth putting things back the way it was. Doing a cleansing, finishing the renovation, trying your best to settle the environment again so things can go back to normal. Particularly when it comes to renovation work, as long as the renovation work is done well, spirits will typically settle back into their environment again. But if you're bulldozing things down and you're not repairing anything and it's staying a mess, it's likely that the spirits are going to continue to be around until you fix the mess that you've made. When it comes to things like fires and high energy events like that, it's likely that the energy will settle down over time. But when it comes to heated events like fights and arguments and screaming matches, that's the kind of thing where you might want to do an energetic cleanse, just to clear out all of that energy that's causing the turmoil so that you can then continue on and hopefully the spirits will have settled down once the energy drops. But those are the main reasons why property or land might be haunted. Either it's caused by a death or it's caused by a sudden surge in energy and the disruption of their home and their location. This can also include like digging up a farmland and knocking down a farm buildings. Anything like that can cause it as well. So it's a case of leaving offerings to spirits if you can, if you need to. So for instance, if you've demolished a farm building and you can't rebuild it, leave an offering in its place to apologize for being an asshole and knocking down a ghost's farm building. And then just building up as best you can, just repairing and resettling that energy down. But property and land aren't the only things that can become haunted. Sometimes objects and people can be too. Now, in relation to the home, sometimes it's the damage of an item that can rile up pre-existing spirits. So if you had an original fireplace that you've ripped out, that might be what has annoyed the pre-existing spirits within that space, whether that's the property or the land. If you have any kind of sentimental item that might have made that location feel like home to someone that came before, whether that's a really old piece of furniture, something as simple as an old range cooker or a fireplace, by taking that out, you might be really pissing them off. So you might want to be giving them an offering, just as you maybe would if you demolished farm buildings or outbuildings, and then try to put everything back in as tasteful a way as possible. Now, it's important to remember here that these spirits have been around for longer than you have, most probably. And so for them, they have lived with their favourite fireplace for the last 100 and something years, perhaps. And so it's going to take them time to get settled again once you replace it, once you give them an offering. It's going to take them time to get used to it. So you've got to be patient with spirits. It's not an instantaneous thing. If you would be annoyed if someone ripped up your favourite dress, then they're going to be annoyed if you rip out their favourite fireplace. And so it's just really important, if you are coexisting with spirits, or even if you just live in an old house, that you do things with respect. Not only if you know that the spirit's present, but also if you don't, it's just generally better just to be very respectful with the things that you're doing and not just smashing old things up because you could get them really both sad and annoyed. I think I would also be really sad and annoyed in that scenario. Now, objects and people are a very interesting aspect of hauntings. When it comes to objects, it's very similar to people becoming attached to properties. People will often become very strongly attached to items and objects, particularly if they've lived with them for their entire lives. Because of this, you'll often find that clothes of significance, such as wedding dresses or children's christening clothes, can be very readily haunted because they encapsulate a snapshot of that person's life, something that may have been very important to them, and so they will cling on to that after death. This applies to wedding rings, engagement rings, promise rings, lockets with family member photographs inside. This could apply to jewelry they've worn for their entire life, pocket watches, things of significance that someone might have worn or carried around with them every day of their entire lives. Things such as glasses and especially things like wedding presents can become very highly attached onto, particularly by individuals who are very sentimental in life and so will likely be very sentimental in death too. Everything from their favourite vase to their favourite cooking spoon might be attached onto in death depending on how strong that attachment is. And so objects are very readily haunted. And as mentioned, if you do move or destroy an object that was very significant to the spirit that was attached to it, they are not going to be happy. And I can understand why. Because of this, the removal or disturbance of any object of significance may cause haunted activity, and so the return of said object to the appropriate location might then stop the haunting. It's also true that a lot of hauntings that suddenly occur may occur because an object has been brought into the home. This is probably the most common reason why hauntings happen out of nowhere. It seems as though your house was not haunted, and then suddenly it is. And at first you think, what could have possibly caused it? More often than not, it is the addition of an item into that space that was usually secondhand or it was antique. These kind of items, especially if they held significance or value to the person who owned them previously or many previouslys before you, they may well have attachments on them that when you bring it into your home, you're also bringing them into your home too. Now, for the most part, these attachments are simply spirits that are sentimental. They don't necessarily mean you any harm, but you may suddenly realise that you have a presence in your home or space that you simply didn't realise that you had previously. Now, I've had this happen personally. Haunted items are surprisingly common, not because of a purposeful haunting, but usually because someone is just so darn attached to an object. This is often the case not only with sentimental items like wedding rings, but also with items of value and importance. Now, when we today think of value, we think of our technology, we think of our cars or our fancy designer things. But we have to think realistically. For the average person historically, the most important thing might have been their watch. Their most valuable item might have been their letter opener. It might have been their favourite chair. And so every time we take something secondhand and we bring it into our space, we have the potential of bringing something in with it. And so it's really important, if you are wanting to avoid any kind of spirit attachment, to really check all the items that you bring in. If you can energy sense, that would be fantastic. You can often tell relatively quickly when something is haunted, unless they are hiding themselves really, really well. Generally, that object will feel strange. In some cases, it might feel powerful in an energetic sense, and unless this item has a significant reason for why it should be powerful in its own right, it may well be that what you're sensing is actually a spirit attachment. Now, I've had this happen myself. I have a tarot deck that has a spirit attached to it, and what you might initially consider to be energy coming off the cards is actually the energy of the attached spirit. Now, in that instance, that spirit is perfectly content in just residing within my space. They mind their own business and I mind my business, so I don't really mind them being here. I've also had experiences with this in the form of a letter opener. This letter opener had a very malicious spirit attached to it. And it leads me on to my next point. Any location or item that saw a tragic, sudden, purposeful death may also become haunted, and not always in the best of ways. Weaponry such as swords, guns, or knives can often become haunted, not necessarily by their target, but by their wielder. So you'll often find that objects that were used that had the potential to cause harm, or that were used within these scenarios, such as armor, such as swords, anything like that, has the potential to have that energy lingering onto it. And so because of this, lots of secondhand items can have spirits attached to them. When you bring them into your home, you're bringing the spirit in with you. And so it's really important to figure out whether that item and spirit is something that you want to bring with you or something that you don't. Now, I really recommend doing some kind of reading, whether that is tarot, whether that's runes or Ogham or pendulum, whatever it is you feel comfortable with, sitting with the object if you can to figure out whether or not that spirit has nefarious intentions or positive intentions, or if they just want to get on with it. Now, it's really important to note here that spirits can lie. And so not only do you have to use the answer to that reading, you have to also use your own intuition. If you have a gut feeling that something isn't right, then trust your gut instinct over what that spirit says. I have met so many people who truly believe that spirits cannot lie. And believe me, spirits can lie. Particularly the very malicious ones will do anything they can to convince you that they are good. So if you can use your gut instinct, I would thoroughly recommend going off that alongside energy sensing and alongside working with divination. Now, not only can rings and letter openers and furniture be associated with spirit attachments, so can mirrors. Now, mirrors in many cultures and traditions are seen as spirit traps or portals. They are known as liminal space, in-betweens, and in-betweens are perfect locations for spirits to come and go. We see this with everything from angels and demons to fairies and ghosts. They're really common places for spirit interactions to take place. I know that I have interacted with lots of spirits through mirrors, and I find it a really useful tool. However, if you don't want to interact with spirits, sometimes mirrors aren't the best thing to have. Especially second-hand mirrors, it's really common for them to have spirits trapped within them, whether that's accidental or purposeful. We see in Victorian England, it was a very common thing that if someone were to die within a space, all of the mirrors were covered over and the windows were opened. It stops the spirit from becoming trapped within one of the mirrors within the room and allowed it to move on into the afterlife. Even in some traditions today, it is said that you should not have two mirrors facing one another, as once two mirrors are facing one another, a portal between the two is created. Now, I've worked with mirrors a lot within my magical practice, and I find them fantastic tools to work with when it comes to spirits, but obviously not everyone wants to work with spirits. So when it comes to mirrors, be very careful if you do get second-hand mirrors, because second-hand mirrors are notorious for spirit interactions. Though it's not something you need to severely worry about. You're not going to have something like The Ring happening in your bedroom if you have a mirror. You're not going to see someone crawling out of your mirror. Instead, you might see things in mirrors that aren't there behind you. You might experience noises, sounds, and movement happening. And depending on where you live, mirrors can stir up spirit activity. So for that reason, a lot of people don't leave mirrors uncovered, or they will lock their mirrors. I am going to do a full video on mirror locking because it's a really interesting thing if you don't want to work with mirrors. And generally, secondhand mirrors are more notorious for this than others. So if you are worried about a secondhand mirror, the quickest way to fix it is to lock it. Because if you lock that mirror, there's nothing that's in it that can get out of it and interact with you. But not everyone wants to lock their mirrors, in which case it's worth doing divination, going with your gut instinct, and just working with that item to see whether or not it gives you any bad feelings or anything occurs, and then go from there. Now, when it comes to sudden hauntings, a lot of people don't realise where it comes from. More often than not, a sudden haunting occurs when you bring something into the home that wants to interact with you. And oftentimes, this can be linked back to an object that's been purchased and brought into your home. So if you're experiencing a sudden haunting, it seems to have come out of nowhere, think back to when it started. Do you have a date? Do you have anything that can pinpoint when it first started? And if you can, think of all the things you've brought into your home. Was there a secondhand dress? Was there a piece of jewellery that you bought from a market stall? Did you go to an antique store and buy yourself a new rocking chair? Cliché, I know, but it happens. Did you bring a mirror into your house for your downstairs bathroom and you didn't realise at the time that there was something attached to it? Oftentimes, sudden hauntings can usually be traced back to a particular object that was brought into your home. Now, these objects don't have to have been of significance to the person. Sometimes objects can attract spirits for different reasons. A big one are porcelain dolls. Porcelain dolls are really popular collector's pieces. The human form in the shape of a doll is ancient. We see dolls going back through history because they are an archetypal representation of the human form. And because of that, these dolls can really attract in spirits who want a physical form. And so for those of you who do collect dolls, if you are experiencing a sudden haunting, it might be that you have a spirit residing in one of the dolls. Now, don't let the movie Annabelle scare the living bejeebus out of you. I promise that most of the time, spirits who are attracted to dolls aren't demons, they aren't really evil creatures. Oftentimes, they want the comfort that a physical form can bring. Now, that isn't me saying that it never happens, that you have a nefarious spirit entering a doll, because it does. Just as you can have a negative spirit in any object or in any location, depending on what occurred there. So it's really important not to fearmonger, but also just be cautious that just because a spirit is present, it doesn't necessarily mean it's human. So you've realised that you have a haunting, and you think back through time to when it started, and you realise you did buy a few things just before it started. What do you do? In this instance, it's about isolation. You need to figure out which item is the problem. Maybe it's a couple of items working together, with different spirits attached to different items. You really need to pinpoint where the problem is coming from. If you have all of the items in your bedroom, as an example, and you're finding that your bedroom is the location that is haunted the most, it could be worth every week moving one of the items that you purchased and placing it somewhere else in the house. If once you've moved that item, the haunting in your room seems to have stopped, it may well be the item that was causing it. So then bring that item back again and see if it gets worse. Move it out and see if it stops. If it stops or the haunting moves to a different area, you found your item, you found the problematic thing. And in which case, you can then choose what to do with that item, whether you want to release the spirit, though please bear in mind, if that spirit has chosen to attach itself to that object, you're essentially ripping it away from its home, which isn't really fair. Or you can choose to rehome that to a practitioner, to someone who collects haunted items who will give them a space where they can feel comfortable, or you can sell it, donate it, whatever you might feel you need to do. If that first item wasn't the problem, then move a second item out. And essentially you're just trying to find the root cause by isolating the problem. And by the end of it, it's quite likely that you will have figured out exactly what the problem was, because when you remove it from the space, the haunting will stop. Now, this can be time consuming, especially if you do really enjoy buying secondhand or vintage, but if you don't want the haunting, it's definitely worth putting the time and effort into figuring out what the problematic item was. Now, not all hauntings are attached to a property, land, or an object. Sometimes the haunting might be caused by you. Now, there's two main reasons why a haunting might be caused by a person. The first is that that person might have a lot of emotion or energy that isn't being released. There are some cases where it's believed that an individual is actually causing this haunted style environment because they're energetically trying to release things that the body and the mind aren't letting go. This is often the case if you do have a lot of emotions that you are bottling up. You might find that you're actually causing this haunting yourself because spiritually, astrally, energetically, you are trying to clear this emotional energy, but you're not actually clearing the emotional energy. You're just causing disrupt and upset energetically within a space, which causes these haunted type effects. Or you yourself might have a spirit attachment. Now, this is relatively easy to pinpoint. If you feel as though you are haunted at home and then you go on holiday and you feel like the holiday cottage is haunted, and then you go to a hotel and you feel like the hotel is haunted, and then you go to your friend's house and you still feel like your friend's house is haunted, and then you go to your parents' house and your parents' house is suddenly haunted, that isn't coincidence. If you're finding that no matter where you go, these strange things keep occurring, it's likely not the location. It's likely something that's attached to you. Now, that might sound utterly terrifying. Usually it isn't. It could be because a loved one has passed and they don't want to leave behind their old life. So they cling onto the people that they cared about the most, and that can cause spirit attachment. In this regard, it's worth telling them that they can let go. Maybe giving them a separate space that they can reside within. A lot of people use spirit houses for this exact reason. You offer the spirit a location where it can reside, where you can give it offerings, where it can be safe, but it isn't attached to you. Or It could be a spirit that just wants to use you as a free ride, that wants to use you and your energy, in which case you may also feel tired and sluggish. But please note, if you do feel tired and sluggish with no known cause, please make sure you get checked out by your doctor or your primary care, because these can be symptoms of more serious medical conditions, not just spirits. And I'm going to say this for everything on this channel. Never use magic or witchcraft or spirits to be a replacement or an explanation for things that are likely medical or mental in nature. It's really important that we take care of all aspects of our life, and if you are in doubt, please make sure that you get checked out by your primary care doctor, and then if they give you the all clear and there's nothing that they can see that's wrong, then you can work with the spiritual, the spirits, and the magical. I do not want anyone to put themselves in harm's way by replacing medical treatment with magic. So these kind of symptoms, these haunted type events alongside physical ailments can suggest that something more nefarious is going on, in which case I would recommend a cleansing, a personal cleansing, followed by a banishing if it doesn't go away. Now, the one thing I haven't touched on so far is a rather rare occurrence, but it can happen occasionally, and that is spirits lingering around due to unfinished spell work and ritual. Now, I would hope that anyone that was summoning spirits or attracting them into a space would also be able to close up that working. Not only do you summon, but you also banish. Not only do you attract, but you also dismiss. It's really important when doing spellwork and ritual with spirits that you are able to do both, because if you leave spellwork unfinished, especially when working with spirits, you can trap them in your space and not allow them to leave. Now, although movies and TV shows may have you believe that this is a terrifying, traumatizing experience, I would argue that in most instances, it's far more terrifying for the spirit than it is for you. Imagine being summoned to a strange space you've never been to before, and then getting stuck there forever. That sounds terrifying, and that's what a lot of spirits do experience, especially if you do summon spirits into a space and then you don't banish them again. So if you are working with spirits, just make sure that you banish them or release them instead of just keeping them in your space. This includes if you fall asleep during spell work or if you accidentally forget to finish a ritual. Make sure that everything that you raise, you also release. Make sure that anything you summon, you also banish. Make sure anything you attract, you also dismiss. That way, you're not going to have any spirits lingering around because you forgot to finish a spell or ritual. And generally, anything that is trapped because of this can be released once the spell is finally completed, or you manually release them by either closing that circle, breaking the seal on their space, or generally banishing them depending on the type of spirit that you've summoned and what you summoned them for. This leads me to the last portion of this video. How can you get rid of a spirit that's causing you misery? Not all spirits need to be removed. If a spirit is minding its own business and is just keeping itself to itself, not causing you, your family, your pets any harm, then I wouldn't bother removing that spirit, because in a lot of cases that is the spirit's home. However, if a spirit is causing you misfortune, illness, if they're making you, your family, your pets uncomfortable and unsafe within your own environment, then you need to do something about it. Now, firstly, it's worth questioning whether you want an item enough to keep it. If a spirit is attached to an item, the easiest way to get rid of it is to get rid of the item. If you remove the item, oftentimes the spirit is more attached to the item than they are to the place, and so they will leave with that item. However, if you want that item, or you want to continue living in the home without that spirit being there, it's worth asking. Ask nicely. Spirits actually work quite well when you ask them nicely. If that spirit still doesn't go when you ask them nicely, then give them a better option. If you can create a spirit house, this could be an item, a piece of jewelry, something that has energy in it usually and has the ability to have offerings added to it. It's kind of sweetening the deal. You're giving them a new home that has energy in it that they can feed off and has offerings that you can continue to give them to appease them. They may then decide that this object is more valuable than staying in your necklace or staying in your house, and they may choose to move to a new spirit vessel or a spirit house that can then be either kept on the property outside of the home, or it could be sent to an antique shop, or it could be donated, or you can just keep it in a safe place so that that spirit resides within it, and then you keep adding offerings if you do want to keep that spirit appeased. That's one way of doing it, but that's not always going to work. In some cases, the spirit likes being attached to you, the land, the property, or the object just a bit too much. So then it's time to amp it up again. We're going to do a cleansing. Now, I have done videos on cleansing. I will link them up here that can be really useful on this subject, both smoke cleansing and non-smoke cleansing, depending on where you live. Now, a cleansing isn't going to push out any strong spirit. It's just not strong enough to do it. However, it gives them that push. It says, I'm done. I'm drawing the line here. You need to leave. And some spirits might go, oh, fine, it's not worth it anyway, and they will just leave. And in which case, that cleansing has been successful. Now, when you do a cleansing, you should never do a cleansing alone, because what a cleansing does is it energizes that space. It vibrates it all up, it makes it all uncomfortable, energies are dispersed, and any minor spirits get unsettled or unnerved, and they might choose to leave. So after you've done a cleansing, you're going to want to put up protections, because anything that you've pushed out by making them really uncomfortable might come back again once the energy is settled. So if you are planning on doing a cleansing, make sure that you protect your property and yourself afterwards. If the cleansing hasn't worked, we're going to need to move on to something stronger, and that would be a banishing. Now, I'm not going to put any specific spells for banishings in this video, mainly because banishings are very dependent on your culture and your tradition. If you do need banishing spells, there are lots out there, or you can make your own using your own knowledge based on your own tradition and your own culture. But banishing spells do something a little bit stronger than cleansing. They essentially force a spirit out of its location. Now, that doesn't mean it's gone forever. That just means it's no longer attached to the object, the person, or the property that it was once attached to. And so when doing banishings, you really have to be careful that you do them suitably. If you are banishing something from yourself or from an object, I would recommend doing it outside of the home, even if that's just outside. Because what happens if you banish from an object inside your home is that you banish that spirit from the object. So it goes from being inside something to being outside, but it's still in your home. So what happens is you banish it from the object, it's now floating around your home, and it could attach to anything else, or it could reattach to that object again. So if you're going to be doing a banishing on yourself or on an object, I'd recommend doing it outside, because then at least it's not ricocheting around your home. So when doing a banishing, I would recommend doing a cleanse, banish, cleanse, protect. Because banishing doesn't remove that spirit entirely, it still has the potential to come back again. So you cleanse a space to give that first warning saying, hey, get out. If it doesn't get out, you move on to a banishing. Now, the banishing is going to dispel that spirit from what it's attached onto. You then follow that with another cleansing. This is going to irritate the area around you to keep that spirit away from you long enough that you can put up protections. Once the protections are up, if they're strong enough, the spirit isn't going to be able to reattach because it can't get past the protections. So if you're doing this on yourself, you're going to need to make sure that you have property protections and personal protections. And I would always recommend you have personal protections anyway. If you're doing this for an object, make sure that you are protecting yourself, your home, and the object after the fact. Otherwise, when you go back inside your home again, the spirit might then attach onto you instead of the object. So it's really important to make sure that you have all of your bases covered, make sure that everything is protected. But the other thing that's important to take note is that if that spirit is really determined, it might not leave your space alone. You might find that that spirit is on your property, even if it can't get inside the building. And in which case, always make sure that you have protections, because otherwise it might see an entryway into your property if it attaches onto you and then you walk it inside. Generally, this scenario is quite rare. Mostly, spirits are quite peaceful and will just reside there quite happily without being invasive or without getting in your way. But sometimes it can happen, and it can be really scary, especially if you don't know what's causing it. So, really quick rundown here. You might find that spirits exist in that property regardless. Whether you live there or not, they're still going to be there. But you might find that spirit activity amps up if there is a high energy event, such as a demolition, such as a fire or a fight. Spirits can attach onto objects and items, especially mirrors and items of significance, and so these might be the reason you might have a sudden haunting in your home. But if you have a haunting that follows you around no matter where you go, it's quite likely that you have a spirit attachment. Oftentimes these can be resolved with a quick cleansing and a push in the right direction, but sometimes you might need something more, and in which case you're really going to need to bring in the big guns and do some banishing. Now when it comes to banishing, one might not be enough. You might have to do one, maybe two. Ideally, you're going to want to get it right on the first try. This can be really intimidating to people if they are just getting started with witchcraft. But generally, cleanse, banish, cleanse, protect is a really good way of doing it. It's the way I was taught how to banish, and it's the way I teach other people how to banish, because I found it to be a really successful technique to making sure that the energy in the space is annoying and disruptive enough to stop the spirit from immediately reattaching to that object. If you find that after the banishing it still hasn't done its job, you might need to do another one, or simply remove the object from your home if you have that option. Generally though, if a spirit has been banished from an object, you can now bring that object inside again. You don't need to keep it outside forever. The spirit is no longer attached to that object, so the object is now clear and you can just bring it inside. Just make sure that you protect it, because if it was attractive enough to one spirit, you might find that it's attractive enough to many. And generally speaking, you might want to continuously do these cleansings and protections repeatedly, particularly if it is something like a necklace, something that you want to be wearing on you or close to you, or a jacket or a handbag, or something like this. You're going to want to be doing regular cleansings and protections to make sure that nothing else attaches onto it. So I suspect that this has been quite a long video. I just hope that it was useful. In the future, I'm hoping to go more in depth of how to do banishings in different styles and different ways. But for now, I do have videos already on my channel about cleansings, both with and without smoke. And hopefully now you have a little bit more understanding of why you might be experiencing a seemingly sudden haunting. In most cases, it's usually a super simple answer. Whether you've disrupted an original feature in a house, you've moved something of significance, or you've attracted something into your home using items, mirrors, or you've brought something in with you. For most of the time, it's a relatively simple fix. You leave an offering to a spirit. This is often alcohol in most cases. If you know the spirit in question, you can choose something that suits them. Otherwise, a general alcohol offering is usually accepted. If you've moved something, you could simply move it back. If you've brought something into your home, you can then remove it from your home. Or if you need to, you can go down the cleansing, banishing, cleansing, protection route. And generally, I would recommend that anyone who is interested in witchcraft learn how to do a cleansing and a protection. Even if you don't plan on doing anything else within witchcraft, it's really worth learning how to do those two things. Because in this instance, it can really help protect you in the future from anything else that you bring in. But generally speaking, just be aware of what you bring into your home, what you bring into your space. This can include other people as well. If a spirit can be attached to you, it can be attached onto anyone else that comes into your home. So just make sure that you are diligent with sensing the energy around you. Take some time to practice it every day, because it's so much easier to deal with a haunting if you do expect it to happen. I knew when I got my tarot cards that there was a spirit attached to them. So when weird things started happening, I didn't think anything of it because I knew it was going to happen. I was already aware that the haunting was going to take place before it did. And after a few months of getting used to the new space, the spirit generally settled down. The same often applies in lots of situations. If you bring an item into your home that has just a standard spirit, nothing negative attached to it, it's just a new place, and so it can take time for that spirit to get used to it. But if it is a very negative spirit, you will need to do something about it, because generally speaking, it never gets better. It always gets worse, especially if it's someone really, really nasty. Cleanse, banish, cleanse, protect. It's time consuming, but it's well worth it. And once you have done it, particularly to an object, item, or yourself, you're generally going to be fine going forwards to bring it back into your home and not have to worry about it bringing anything in with it. But all I can say is be diligent with what you bring in and make sure that you are cleansing and protecting as you need to. Ideally, if you have protections up in advance, you're not going to need to cleanse all that regularly, because your protections are going to be stopping anything in that you might then need to cleanse. Protections are such a good form of magic, and I would recommend everyone learn how to do them, at least some anyway. So I hope that you did enjoy this video. I hope that you found it useful. I know it was exceptionally long and exceptionally wordy, but I didn't know how else to do it, so I just shoved it all in one video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. Have you had experience with any of these styles of haunting? If you have, feel free to let us know down in the comment section. I would love to know what the haunting was associated with. Was it an item? Was it something you brought in? Was it something that was already in the home? And how did you deal with it, if you did at all? I know a lot of people want to learn more about the subject, so if you do have any first-hand experiences, I would love to hear about them myself, and I'm sure other people would as well, if you do feel comfortable sharing that. The comment section is down below, and I'm sure people would really appreciate it. If you do have any comments, questions, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit-chat with the community, feel free to put it down in the comment section. There is a Discord server, the link is in the description box, where we do have a spirits section, so if you would like to interact with other people who have experience, or simply share your experiences with others in a more private environment on Discord, you can do that by following the link below. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try my best with magical content every single week. I hope you're all staying safe, I hope you have a marvellous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! My nose. Sneezy, sneezy. Spin my chair the other way so I can actually see my computer screen. Just casual things.